Hey, this is Keith Ball, BikerNet.com, live from the AMD show affiliate here at the Harley-Davidson Milwaukee Custom Bike Show 2012. And we're interviewing another contestant here from Cook Customs right here in Milwaukee. Matt Drew. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Good. Now you guys have an interesting following, or an interesting history with this show circuit. You were the first American winners of the AMD show.
Yeah, back in 2009, our bike Rambler was our entry, and we were the first Americans to actually take the whole show.
That's amazing. I bet it was a real accomplishment, huh?
Oh, fantastic.
Now the bike in the back here, the Shovelhead, is also an AMD winner.
Yeah, it was entered in 08, and we actually took 4th in the show then. We were the highest placing American in that show as well.
This bike here that you have here today is a Norton, and tell us a little bit about it.
Well, the build started, we actually had a customer come into the shop about 3 years ago that wanted a bike made. And we've done a couple of Nortons before this point. And the bike was started off with Dave and I working on it. Dave got involved with some other projects, so this is actually my first build solo from Cook Customs. It's a 72 Norton that the customer bought off the showroom floor. He said he's gone through like 6 different paint jobs with it. A few years back he actually got bored with the engine. It was a 750. So he put some money into it and bored it out to an 880, redid the cams and polished and shaved the heads a little bit. So it's a fun little bike.
You know, Norton's had sort of an angular look about them, and you've taken this and given it sex appeal and given it flow and given a lot of artistic qualities. Oh,
thank you. Yeah, our inspiration's always been around like the old board track racers. So we like to keep them low, keep them short, and just kind of have that old school curve to them.
You mentioned how Dave Cook was really your mentor and has helped you through this. So give us a little history of you with the shop sweeping the floors and now building motorcycles.
About 8 years ago, I met Dave Cook, and he was working out of the shop that I was assisting with some other projects on. And I just started watching what he was doing. I was kind of the fly on the wall, sweeping the floors, putting tools away. And eventually I started to watch a little bit more closely, imitate the motions on like the different tools of the lathe, the welder, the mill. And over the past 8 years I've been able to get to this point where I have been able to enter my own bike into the AMD show. So,
how long have you been with Cook?
I think this is going on my 9th year working at Cook's.
An amazing process. Well, tell us about just one of the items on the bike, the front end, the way it flows, and you manufacture the front end, and tell us about those reverse grips.
Well, the front end is actually, a few years back we did a lot of front ends like this. They were a little bit skinnier, a little bit more simplistic. With this front end, we wanted to expand it a little bit more. So a little bit more work went into it, splitting tubes, widening the forks. All the springs and are all nickel plated. The hand levers they're a reproduction really of the old board tracks, because that was kind of their solution back in the day for the ball end levers that we have now. It was basically to create a cage around your hand so you wouldn't slip off the handlebar, and they were also functional at the same time. So that's really one of our signature parts, is the reverse hand lever on just about every one of our bikes that we build.
Those things are so amazing. Tell us about what Dave's doing now. He started a bar. He opened a bar.
Yes, he did. After we won the World Championship, that bike that we won with, it took a lot out of everybody. I mean, it was an 18-month build, and Dave just needed to do something a little bit different with his time, so he actually opened up this little bar about 40 minutes north of here called the Little Kohler House that he's been working a lot on, and since that time I've been kind of just keeping the tradition alive of his style in his shop. Well,
tell me a little bit, like I mentioned to you earlier, that the amazing thing that it's sort of Brough Superior to me, it reminds me of Brough Superiors, is that even the slightest little element, the little linkages or some, all have curves to it. And it's one thing to make a linkage that's just straight, even if it's unique, but to give it curve, you add sex appeal to it. It's, to me, that's a real style element.
Yeah, at least for my entire history in building bikes, I've always learned that a sharp edge, it has a look for a specific style of bike. For the inspiration for all of our bikes, though, it just wouldn't look right with hard curves. I think it would make it look smaller. So we add the curves to kind of hide how small the bike is to begin with. It kind of takes your eye away from that and just kind of adds an additional flow to the bike.
That's interesting. How about the gas tanks? You told me there's split gas tanks and the coils in between.
Yeah, with that bike, seeing how how small it is to begin with, to get around the problem with the ignition coils. The ignition coils are actually pretty big for the Nortons. So what we did was we did 2 tank halves and just bolt them together, and actually inside the tank or hanging from the backbone is the coil assembly.
Tell me about that kicker pedal.
Now, the kicker pedal is actually the pedal on it right now is there for my comfort for kicking it. The thing's got more compression of any bike than I've ever kicked before. When we first put it back together, a friend of ours who's probably got another 75 pounds on me couldn't kick the bike over. So after I actually started getting used to it, it kicked back on me once, and I thought it broke my foot. It kicked back so hard. So I put that pedal on there just so I could start the thing.
Well, those kicker arms, and I think that the shovel head also has this arched, beautifully rounded kicker arm.
And that's how Norton kick arms were. I mean, even on the nickel bike, the shovel head has a Norton transmission in it, and that's almost a stock shape from Norton. Obviously, we've altered it a little bit, to make it flow better with the bike, but that's almost an exact replica of what the Nortons actually came with.
Well, and tell us how the seat works and how the suspension works on it.
Well, because it is a hardtail and the bike is so small, it'd be kind of hard to put your seat inside that little, U-shaped out there. So I put a monoshock seat on there that actually feels smoother and lighter on your ass than it does, on a regular suspended bike. So it's a bicycle front end shock is what's on there with a heavier duty spring.
Is it a rock shock?
It's an offshoot. It's some imitation shock we found on eBay.
Now, the one thing on this bike that I feel is a little out of place is that air filter.
The air filter on it, because of all the modifications done to the engine, when we first ran it, I had some hand-spun aluminum velocity stacks on there, and it didn't run very well at all. So I ended up putting that back on there just so I could ride it here to the show. It wouldn't have made it otherwise. It needs some tuning.
It's interesting that you're based here in Milwaukee, the home of Harley Davidson, and you're building Nortons and sort of offshoot bikes. Any thoughts about that?
We'll build anything that comes to our door. I mean, we've built, obviously we use some Harley engines, a lot of S&S, Nortons, they're very plentiful here in the US. I mean, over in England, it's very hard to find them because we sucked up all the Nortons when we could. So they're very easy engines to work on, especially if you want to tear them down and do something different to them. And they're plentiful, so it's kind of like Harley here. You can actually find parts for these things fairly easy.
That's amazing. Well, it's a pleasure talking to you. You guys build amazing bikes, and I wish you much success in the future.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Take care, buddy.